Today's stuff we're going to be learning is Bava Kamma Daf Tzadi. Today's stuff is sponsored by the Hadran women of Long Island as we share the simcha of our friend and co-learner Shoshana Shore and her family upon the engagement of her son Eli to Rachel Markel. May the joy of this new couple spread to encompass all of Klal Yisrael, and may we all continue to share smacha. Okay, we're going to get started from the bottom of yesterday's daf. If you recall, we were talking about takana Usha and the fact that a woman is not allowed to sell her nichse belog, or if she does, the husband has the rights to get it back from whoever she sold it to. So now the Gemara suggested maybe this whole takana Usha is a machloket between tanaim. And if you remember, we quoted this whole these two different braitot about if an eved is nichse belog of a woman. That basically means the woman came into the marriage with this eved. It was part of her family group of slaves. She brings it into the marriage as nichse belog. That means basically she's going to get the slave as is when the marriage is over. And what if she knocks out a tooth or an eye, or the husband knocks out the tooth or the eye? Now, the issue is that kind of the slave is in between because it's owned by the woman, the goof, but the braitot, the husband, gets all the rights to the slave while they're married. So the question is, who's really considered the owner for this whole issue of shein v'ayin, which is this unique halacha, that if the master, now we have to define who's the master of the slave, knocks out the tooth, eye, arm, leg of this slave, the slave will go free. So one braitot said it would be the woman who sets the slave free because she owns the slave. And according to the second braitot, neither the woman nor the man. Now, you could say, and that's what the Gemara is suggesting, that this is the machloket between whether there's takana Usha or not. If you hold takana Usha, it means that even though the wife theoretically is the owner of the slave, she's not really, because she can't really sell it. She doesn't have rights to sell it, so that means she's not really the owner, and that would be the second braitot, that neither the woman nor the man. Because the man also isn't the full owner. Even if you hold by takana Usha, you could take it away from them, but it's still, he's not the full owner because the wife, technically speaking, is really the owner. And in the event that he divorces her, she gets it back fully. So he's not really the owner, and she's not really the owner. If you hold by without takana Usha, well, then she's the legitimate owner. She owns the goof, the body, he owns the proceeds, and therefore it's she who will hit the slave that will make the slave go free. That's the first explanation. To which the Gemara, starting about 5 lines from the bottom, the Gemara is going to reject that explanation, say it's not necessarily, could be, that's the machloka between the two braitot, but it's not necessarily. We're now going to explain it in 3 other possible ways. Number 1, lo. You might be right that that's the difference, but it's not a matter of was there a takana of Usha like this or not. It was that one braitot was talking about before they instituted the takana, and then it was fully the woman's, and that's why the woman would set this slave free by knocking out his eye. But the second braitot is after the takana, and that's why neither one sets the slave free by knocking out their eye or whatever it might be. Second option, maybe they're both after takana Usha, takana Usha, and they both agree that there is a takana, and this was instituted. Ella, lemanda amar liisha v'lo liish. So now you really have to explain. If you say it's after the takana, well, then we very much understand the second braitot, which says neither the woman nor the man sets the slave free, because after the takana, really neither is the full owner. She loses a lot of her rights, but he still doesn't have full rights, so neither is the full owner. But how do we explain the one about the isha v'lo the ish? If it's after the takana, how can you say the woman's the full owner? If she sells slave and the husband can take it back, that doesn't really mean she's the full owner. So my taima, kiderava, de amarava, and this is a statement we've seen a number of times already. Hekdesh, chametz, v'shichur, mafki'im, midei shiabut. So let's first explain the statement, and then we'll see how it fits here. The basic usual case is that if you have a loan, okay, you owe me money, or let's say I owe you money, and I say to you, listen, I owe you money, I took out a loan from you, you can collect the loan from my slave, let's say, okay, this slave. Or I say you could collect the loan from my animal, or you could collect the loan from my food, this particular food that I have, okay, this I don't know, bread I have in my freezer, okay? And then what happens? So you have a shibud on it. That's what's called the shibud. Now, my property, my object that's in my house is liened to you. but it's in my house. But it is lien to you, you have a shibud on. But if I decide to take that animal that I promised you and makdish it, that's hekdesh, and I say, this is going to be sanctified to the temple, or it's chametz and comes Pesach and it now becomes, and I don't sell it, it becomes forbidden to benefit from. So now you don't really have a lien on anything because it's nothing. And shichur, I had a slave, but I freed the slave. So even though the slave was promised you, the slave is now free and a full-fledged Jew. So all those things, you now no longer have a lien on that item, even though I promised it to you. So likewise, you could say here, even though the husband, what was the husband's relationship to the slave? Well, first of all, he gets produce, but that's fine. That's one that is irrelevant here. But he has access. He can, if she sells it while they're married, he can take it back. That's like a shibud. It means that he has rights to it. But if she frees it because she hit the slave, and because in the end, she really is the full owner, it's just he has a shibud on it. He has a lien on it because he can take it back if she sells it. So if she frees it by usual laws of freeing, by knocking out its eye, then that undoes the shibud. Okay? And therefore, she can actually free the slave, even though he can take it back from a purchaser. The shibud overrides that whole power that he has, that he gained through this takana. So now they say, okay, well, if you're going to say that, then what about the one who says that neither the woman nor the man can free the slave? What, they disagree with Rava? Lema de Rava tanaihi? Is this whole thing of machloket tanaim, whether or not we hold by Rava? Does this prove that there are some people who disagree with Rava about this in the tanaitic time period? Now, again, Rava was later, but the point is, we're claiming that the basis of that tanaitic opinion was what Rava said. You might have worded it, but they also held it earlier. Now, is it a machloket? And is that what the other opinion is saying? To which they say no. You could say that the braitot that says that neither the husband nor the wife has the power to free is not because they don't hold like Rava. They hold like Rava. That hekdesh, chametz, shichur, all of those override a shibud. But what? This case is different. In this case, when they came in Usha and they said, we are instituting that a husband can undo the sale of the woman and take it back from people she bought it from while they're married, right? That if she sold it while they were married, she didn't really have the rights to sell it. He could take it back, even though she did have the rights, but they came and said, no, she doesn't anymore, which we really haven't figured out why they instituted this. We'll go back and look in Ketubot and see if they give some explanation. Here, the commentaries don't really discuss it. But not only did the rabbi say the husband could take it back from anyone who she sold it to, but even more so, almuah means they gave him a lot of power. They gave him strength here that it overrides Rava. In other words, generally, shichur mafkia midei shibud. If you do it like a mathematical equation, shichur is greater than shibud, but not if the shibud is so great. And this shibud they gave to the husband, this lien on her property, is so great that it overrides the shichur here. So this is a unique situation where Rava's din just wouldn't apply. Rava's logic. Again, this is all just a suggestion. We don't know if it's true. This is just a way of suggesting that that's possibly the debate between them. Ibaitema, third option to understanding the debate between them. Again, does the slave go free by the woman or by neither of them? Ibaitema. Now we're going to go the opposite way. Before we said, we're going to assume everyone agrees there's takana usha. Now we're going to say everyone agrees there is no takana usha. That has nothing to do with this. The whole machloket is the rights to, if you have rights to the produce or the proceeds, does that give you rights to the principal or not? Now, if you say, so let's go through. This is a case where the woman, right, all nichsei malog are like this. The woman keeps the goof, is hers, the principal. The husband has the produce. But does giving him the produce, is it as if he's the owner of the slave itself, the principal? So that's a debate. That's possibly the debate here between the two different tanaitic opinions. The braitot that says the woman can can basically free the slave by knocking out his tooth, that opinion will hold, oh, the woman is the sole owner. The fact that the husband has rights to proceeds doesn't give him rights to the goof of the slave. The one who says neither one can is because the woman loses her rights to the principal as well, because it's almost like neither really owns. If you say kinyan pero ki kinyan goof, now here you have to take it. If you take it literally, having rights to the proceeds is like having rights to the body. Well, then it sounds like the husband owns the slave. If the husband owns the slave, theoretically the slave should go out if the husband knocks out the tooth. But no, it doesn't mean it's completely. It means it's like having ownership rights to the body of the slave. So now we have the woman really owns it, but the husband has significant rights that are almost like owning the principal, the slave itself. So now the slave doesn't go out with either of them because nobody is the full, complete owner of this slave. So that's the third option. It's really the fourth option. The first option was to say, do we hold by takana Usha or not? Was there a takana or was there not a takana? But then we said, no, not necessarily. We gave 3 other alternative explanations. So we ended up with 4 explanations of this machloket. Now that we're already on the fourth one, which was, is kinyan pero ki kinyan aguf or not? And perhaps that's the machloket. They're now going to show 2 other tanaim seem to debate this issue as well. And now we get to a different issue about a slave. If you kill your Canaanite slave, okay, if you knock out their tooth, eye, whatever it might be, a limb that will not regenerate, the slave goes free. If you kill the slave, even though he's not fully Jewish, but he is partly Jewish, right? It's almost like a convert, you get killed as well. Okay? Life for life. But there's a pasuk that explains. Now, let's say, forget about the slave. If I hit somebody and they don't die immediately, but they die 3 days later on account of the fact that I hit them, then I'm liable to death penalty, because what's the difference if they died immediately or they didn't die immediately? But if it's my slave, there's a unique halacha here called yomayim, coming from the pasuk in Shemot 21:21. Ach im yom o yomayim ya'amod lo yukam ki kaspohu. Okay, let's start from the end. Because he is mine, my possession, okay, I own him. If he lives another day or 2, which the rabbis explain as anywhere past 24 hours, if he survives, lo yukam, that death is not avenged, meaning we do not kill me. So if I hit my slave and 25 hours later, the slave dies on account of my hitting them, I don't get the death penalty. Only though if they're my slave. So now we're going to see a machloket in a case where one person has kinyan perot and another has kinyan aguf. Is the slave going to go free if either the one who has kinyan perot or the one who has kinyan aguf is going to kill them? So let's see the case. Hamocher avdola achir. So let's go back to Ruth and Naomi. Ruth sells her slave to Naomi. But she says, I'm selling you my slave right now. However, but for the next 30 days, I want the slave to work for me. So for those 30 days, first 30 days, the slave is really belonging already to Naomi, because Ruth sold the slave to Naomi. So the goof belongs to Naomi. The perot, which means the work of the slave for those 30 days, though, is Ruth's. So now there's going to be 4 opinions about whether if either Ruth or Naomi are to kill the slave during this 30-day period, would the slave, and then again, kill in a way that the slave only died 25 or more hours, right, 24 plus 1 minute, hours later, would the person get the death penalty? Now, if they're not the owner, they're not considered the exclusive owner, or we'll see, they're not the owner, then the slave, then they would get the death penalty, because they're just like a regular person killing another person, right? And Eved Kanani is considered a person for the case of death penalty. But if they're my slave, right? If Ruth is the owner or Naomi's the owner and kills the slave, then they will not get the death penalty. So we have to define who's the owner here. So let's see. The first 2 opinions are going to match. Is kinyan perot like kinyan aguf or not? So let's see. Rabbi Meir Omer. So Rabbi Meir says, Rishon yeshno bedin yom yomayim. Ruth is the one who has the law of yom yomayim. She is the owner. Mipnei shu tachtav. because the slave is basically working for her at the time. Now, what does this show? So the Gemara stops the braitot to explain. Kasaval kinyan perot kikinyan gufdami. If we view Ruth as the owner, even though she doesn't really own the slave himself, she's considered the owner because she has kinyan perot. Okay, and therefore, if she kills the slave, if she hits the slave on Monday and the slave dies on Tuesday, more than 24 hours later, she will not get the death penalty. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Shini yeshno b'din Yomi yomayim mipnei shu kaspo. Kasavar. Okay, so now the second opinion, Rabbi Yehuda says, it's Naomi who's considered the owner, who has the law of Yomi yomayim. So if Naomi hits the slave and the slave dies 25 hours later, Naomi won't be punished. But if Ruth does, of course she will be. Because she's the real owner. The slave is considered Naomi's property now because Ruth sold her the slave, even though she's not working for Naomi right now. Kasaval, now here comes in the Gemara and explains, here you have it. Kinyan perot lav kikinyan guftami. The fact that Ruth has rights to the slave right now, and the proceeds of it, the work of the slave, has no bearing on her ownership of the slave. Those are the first two opinions, and that matches, and we could have stopped here. But what the Gemara is going to do now is bring another two opinions in that braitot, explain them, and then we're going to go to a statement of an Amora and another braitot, and we're going to attribute them and say these are just like the last opinion in this braitot, which is going to be Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Yosi Omer, Shnehem yeshnam b'din Yomi yomayim. Actually, it's both Ruth and Naomi. Okay, we're going to get to all the permutations. Either it's Ruth, or it's Naomi who's the owner, or it's both, or it's neither. Okay, so they say they're both the owners. Now, the owners, to the extent, you have to remember, where is this going? If you consider them both the owners, then neither will get the death penalty if they kill the slave, right? If they kill the slave and the slave dies immediately within 24 hours, they will get killed. But if the slave waits a day or two before they die, then they won't get the death penalty. Well, you can see why, because each one has some sort of ownership over the slave. And misapkale, this is a case of doubt. Kinyan perot, kinyan guftami, ilav kinyan guftami. We don't know who's more the owner, the one who has the perot or the one who has the guf. And therefore, safek nefasha lahakel. Well, we're not going to kill you out of a case of doubt. So since if you weren't really the owner, you would get killed. But if you were really the owner, you wouldn't get killed. So we're going to be lenient here and say, we're not going to kill you because we're not sure if you're deserving of the death penalty. Rabbi Elazar Omer, Shnehem einam b'din Yomi yomayim. Neither is in this unique law. Both are going to get killed if they kill. Zeh lefi she'eino tachtav, v'zeh lefi she'eino kaspo. Because there is no one true owner. One has the problem that it's not owned by them, which is Ruth, and the other has the problem, which is they don't have access to the work of the slave right now. That's Naomi. So neither is considered the owner to get this exemption. So they're actually both going to get killed. If either one of them kills the slave and the slave waits 24 hours before dying, they're both going to get killed. So now we want to deal with this last opinion. Amar Rava, my time to Rabbi Elazar. Where does Rabbi Elazar get this? Amar Ka. So Rava explains, the pasuk says, Ki kaspohu. Right? The end of that pasuk was, why is this a halacha? Because this slave is owned by you. What do they learn from the words Ki kaspohu? Kaspo hamiyuchad lo, which is explained by a few different commentaries in different ways. But perhaps it can be understood as you have to be the exclusive owner. If you're not the exclusive owner, because you're sharing it with someone, then that's not considered yours, and you won't get this exemption. And as in this case, there's two potential owners here. So now they say, Keman az laha da amar amemar. Well, Amemar made a statement. He's an Amora, and now we're going to say, according to who does this statement fit in with? And we're going to say Rabbi Elazar. He said, Ish v'isha. Now we're back to a different issue, perhaps relating to a slave, perhaps not. Most of the commentaries say it is relating to a slave. Ish v'isha shemachul b'nichsei malog. If they sell a slave, if the man sells the slave that belonged to the woman is nichsei malog of hers, or if the woman sells her slave that's nichsei malog of hers, lo asu v'lo klum. It's not a sale. Again, for the same reason, Kiman ki Rabbi Elazar. Because what? Well, for him, he only has braitot. He doesn't own the guf. And for her, she doesn't own the braitot. She only owns the guf. Neither one has the rights to sell. Man tana lahaditanu Rabbanan. Who's the one who holds in this braitot? And again, we're going to take a braitot this time, not an Amora, but a braitot. And we're going to say this braitot is also according to Rabbi Elazar. Misha chetzio eved, the chetzio ben cholin. This we've seen many times. It's a case where two people own a slave and then one frees it, one doesn't. So the slave is half free, half not free. V'chein eved shel shnei shutafim, or he's owned by two different owners. Ein yotzim b'rashei varim she'enan choslim. If you knock out something that will not regenerate, like an arm, an eye, a tooth, all those, they don't go free because they're owned. They're not kaspo hamiyuchad lo. It's not a case where kaspo, the way they darshaned it, only owned by this person. So they don't go free if one of the owners frees them, knocks out a tooth or eye. So who does this go? According to Amar Le Mordechai Ravashi, Hachi Amar Mishmeid Rava, Rabbi Elazar. Okay, this is Rabbi Elazar. Why? Milo Amar Rabbi Elazar, Kaspo Hamiyuchadlo, Hachanami Avdo Hamiyuchadlo. Okay, same thing. It would have to be just like here in the case of the Yomi Yomayim, it says Kaspo. Also, when it talks about Eved, in the case of knocking out the tooth or the eye, we mean Avdo, who is entirely theirs. So if we have a slave who's owned by two people and one knocks out the tooth, the slave is not going to go free. Okay, that's the end of this sugya. So let's do a quick review. And there's a debate whether it's Rabbi Elazar or Rabbi Elazar. This happens often. I see you're asking about it. It's written Rabbi Elazar, but many people say it's Rabbi Elazar. Anyway, we'll leave that issue aside. We suggested the takana Usha is a machloket tanaim. We brought two different braitot. Then we said it's possible there's three other ways of understanding the machloket here, and it's not necessarily that. The last way was kinyan perut is ki kinyan aguf or not kinyan aguf, and from there we got off on a different case of the Yomi Yomayim, a case where within this law of Yomi Yomayim, we had a case where someone owned the perut and the other one owned the goof, and we suggested and we proved the first two opinions are based on is kinyan perut like kinyan aguf or not. That was Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda. From there, we got to two other opinions. Rabbi Yosi was just in doubt about this case, and Rabbi Elazar who said, no, it's not going to be applicable unless you're the complete owner. And then from there, we got to two other statements, one of a Gemara, one of a braita, which basically said something similar, and we said, that's attributed to Rabbi Elazar. Now we're going to move on to a new topic, boshet. Okay, the payment for boshet. We're going to get to a pretty long Mishna because most of the Mishna is a story, a very interesting story, I should say. Somebody, unclear what tokel chavero, we've actually seen this case for you, that you hit them in the ear, you cause them to, get kind of shocked, cause them embarrassment. It's some sort of something you did, perhaps has to do with the ear, perhaps doesn't have to do with the ear. Could be you blow in their ear, like tokel, like a shofar, made a loud noise in their ear. Whatever it was, you humiliated them in some way. Noten lo sela, you pay a sela, which is 4 zuz. Rabbi Yehuda Nesia, Rabbi Yosi haGelili maneh. You pay 100 zuz. Now that's a huge difference. 4 zuz, 100 zuz. Okay, it's one of these rare machlokot where we have a huge discrepancy between the two opinions. Although we're going to have a question, what does this maneh mean? Is it a maneh Tzuri or is it maneh medina? Now maneh medina is worth an eighth of the maneh Tzuri, which would end up being 12.5 zuzim, which is actually not as far as 4. But we're going to see later the Gemara is going to say it's not a maneh medina. It's actually the maneh Tzuri that's worth 8 times that, which is 100. Stelo, if you slap someone in the face, no tein lo 200 zuz, you give them 200 zuz, okay, which is like a lot of money. That's a whole year's, that's the money from the ketubah. It's like a year's worth of living expenses. La'achar yado, if you slap them in the face using the back of your hand, apparently that's much more humiliating. No tein lo 400 zuz, you get double the amount, 400 zuz. Sarambos, no, you pull on someone's ear, talash b'saro, you pull their hair, rakak v'higia bo'oroko, if you spit on them and the spit reach them. He'evir talitomi many, you took off their cloak, and I kind of undressed them in public. Para rosh ha'isha b'shuk. Okay, this is going to be interesting. We get to uncovering a woman's hair in the shuk, right? Which could show you maybe there was a source that either it was just commonplace for women to cover their hair, or there's an obligation to cover your hair. Either which way, you uncovered it, humiliating this woman by taking off her hair covering in public. Noten lo 400 zuz. You have to pay 400 zuz. Okay, now moving to Amud Bet. Zehaklal. Now this line is very unclear what this means. This is the rule. Hakol lefi chvodo. It all goes according to the honor of the person that you humiliated. Now, first of all, we already learned hakol lefi hamivayesh vehamitvayesh. It's both. This one seems to say only one of them. And what's this coming? Didn't we just say there's set amounts? So Rashi tells us already that we're going to get to this, not today, but in tomorrow's daf. But Gemara mefaresh kulahu chumra. Is this a kula or is this a chumra? Is this saying all the amounts were for a person who's in a high place in society, but if you're poor, not as important, well, then you'll get less. Or is it saying the opposite? Is it saying, oh, all those amounts, those are basic amounts, but if you're a wealthy person, perhaps you'll have to pay a lot more for them if you humiliate them. So it's unclear where this is going. Amar Rabbi Akiva, afilu aniyim sheb'Yisrael ro'in otam ke'ilu hem bnei chorin she'yardu minichsehem shem bnei Avram Yitzchak v'Yaakov. We're all equal. And therefore, even if poor people get humiliated, we're going to up that fee to be like the fee for wealthy people who basically lost their money, because a wealthy person who lost their money is now poor. We're going to view all poor people as if they were wealthy once and lost their money, and therefore give them the higher payment. So it's not just that we're going to view everyone as equal, it's that we're going to up, right? We're not going to find some middle ground. We're going to treat everyone as if they were wealthy people. Now we get to our interesting situation. There was a guy who uncovered a woman's hair in the marketplace. So she goes before Rabbi Akiva and says, this guy owes me money. So he says, okay, you're right. The guy has to pay you 400 zuz. Amarlo, the guy says, listen, can you give me a little time? I'll pay the money, but give me a little time. So Rabbi Akiva said, sure, no problem. I'll give you time. So he now goes and spies on her a little bit, and he sees her by the entrance of her courtyard. So he's on the street outside her courtyard, and he breaks a jug. In the jug, had a little bit of oil in it. Okay, and isar is a basic coin, so it had that amount's worth of oil, not a lot. So what did she do? She saw the oil spilled on the floor. She said, oh, what a waste of oil. Let me use it on my hair. I'll put it in my hair. It'll make my hair look nice. So she takes off her hair covering. Remember, she's right outside her chatzir by the street. She takes off her hair covering. She puts her hand in the oil and smears it on her hair. He made sure that there were witnesses that witnessed her uncovering her hair in public. Okay, it might not have been like in the shuk, but it was in public outside her house. Uba lifnei Rabbi Akiva, and he comes before Rabbi Akiva. Amarlo, lizoni noten 400 zuz. I'm going to have to pay 400 zuz for a woman for uncovering her hair when she herself doesn't care about uncovering her hair in public. Look what she did. Amarlo, Rabbi Akiva says to him, lo amalta klum. What you say has no bearing in the court. Hachovel ba'atzmo. If one injures themselves. Now, I'm not allowed to injure myself, but patur, I'm not going to have to pay damages. Who am I going to pay damages? To myself? But if somebody else does it to me, they're going to have to pay me. I'm not allowed to cut fruit trees. I can't uproot fruit trees. So if I uproot a sapling of a fruit tree, I'm not allowed to do that. Patur, but if I do it in my own garden, so I'm not allowed to do it, but I'm not going to be liable to pay damages. But if other people did it in my field, chayavim, of course they're going to be chayav. And what he's basically saying is, this woman might be willing to uncover her hair for whatever reason in public for her own, if she did it herself, that's one thing. But if somebody else comes and uncovers her hair, that's humiliating. Even if she uncovers her hair in public, it doesn't make a difference. What you did to her was humiliating. And therefore, you're going to have to pay anyway. I'm sure Rabbi Akiva didn't like the fact that this guy also pushed it off. And I think he probably got wind of the situation that this man was clearly setting up the woman. But in addition, the logic states true, which is if somebody else does something to you, right? If you embarrass yourself, it's not the same as if somebody else embarrasses you. We all know that. It's a huge difference. So just because, right, it's like people also sometimes put themselves down, but if somebody else puts them down, they get very upset about it. It's not the same thing. Okay. Now the Gemara starts. That was a very long Mishna. Now we get to the Gemara. Manit Tzuri tnan o maneh medina tnan. When they say maneh, was that 100 zuz? Or was that an eighth of it, which is calculated by the maneh, right? There were different currencies. They were called the same thing, which happens a lot. If currencies, the same thing could be called the same kind of coin, but it's worth a different amount. So which one does it mean? And we had this question earlier in the Masechet. Tashma, let's learn from the following story. Dahu Gavra, the takale lechavre. There was a guy who, whether it's blowing someone's ear, hit by someone's ear, whatever they did something to their friend. Ata lekamei de Rabbi Yehuda Nesia. So that was the case in the Mishna where we said either a sela for dinarim or a maneh. So the case comes before Rabbi Yehuda Nesia. He's the grandson of Rabbi Yehuda Nesia. Amarle, ha'ana, Rabbi Yosi haGelili. He says something very unclear. There's me, and there's Rabbi Yosi haGelili. And therefore, havla manet Tzuri. And therefore, give this person a manet Tzuri. So here, forget about the first part of what he said. What's clear is, what did he say? Manet Tzuri, shma mina, manet Tzuri, tanan shma mina. So we already understand that the manet is a manet Tzuri, and it's the higher amount, which goes back and begs the question, why is there such a huge discrepancy between 4 zuz and 100 zuz? But they're not relating to that. Now the Gemara wants to know, ma ha'ana ha Rabbi Yosi haGelili. What is this? There's me and there's Rabbi Yosi haGelili. What are we talking about here? What did he mean? If you want to say this is what he meant to say, and then we're going to have a big problem with this. I saw what you did. I was witness to it. And ha Rabbi Yosi haGelili damar manet Tzuri. Now, who's Rabbi Yosi haGelili? He's the one in the Mishna who says it's a manet Tzuri. So there's me who saw you. There's Rabbi Yosi haGelili who holds that someone who does this pays 100 zuz. So zil hav leile manet Tzuri. But if you say that, l'meimer de'ein nase dayan. Well, Rabbi Yehuda Nesia is paskening. He's the judge here. How could he, if he witnesses something, he can't be a judge. And if you think he could, well, I'm going to tell you why it's obvious he can't. V'hatanya, and this is a very fascinating sugya. Can a witness be a judge? So there's a machlok Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva about it, but you're going to see that both of them really think that a witness can function both as a witness and as a judge. We'll see there's a difference between them, but here's the difference. Sanhedrin, if people in the Sanhedrin, the judges, if they saw somebody kill somebody else, some of them basically, if the whole Sanhedrin saw the case, how are they going to rule in it? So some function as witnesses, and they come before others of them that function as the judge. Okay, so even though they saw the case, they can be a judge, but they can't be a witness and a judge. They can't testify and then rule based on their own testimony. Divrei Rabbi Tarfon. Rabbi Akiva omer, kulam edim hem, ve'ein ein nase dayan. They all saw it. Nobody can be a judge in this case. There's no way, because they saw the situation. Now, ad kan lo kam Rabbi Tarfon, ela de miksatan nasu edim, miksatan nasu dayanim, aval ein nase dayan lo kam out. Now, this is what I said before. Rabbi Tarfon said, some of them will function as witnesses, and they'll come appear before the judges. But nobody, even Rabbi Tarfon doesn't think that they can function both as the witness and as the judge, which is what Rabbi Yehuda Nesia was doing, if that's how we understood him. So, Kitanya, so the Gemara explains, it could be what they're talking about there is Kigon Shera'u Balayla. The machlok of Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva is when the witnesses saw at night. Now, this is a very strange answer. We're going to try to explain it. But if witnesses saw at night, since you can't judge at night, they can't be judges in that case, okay? Or they can't be both the witness and the judge. Because they couldn't do judgment right then. But if it happens during the day and you see it right then, and you can just judge it on the spot, you're allowed to do that. So since they couldn't judge it on the spot, the next day they have to go to court. And when they go to court, they can't be on both sides. But if they saw it during the day, which is a good question, why this really changes things, and it's just a suggestion. It's not clear. And in fact, they're going to suggest another suggestion because I think it's a pretty weak argument, because why would there really be a difference? And then you have to really ask the question, what's the reason for ein eid nase dayan? So I'm going to give you 3 opinions of the Rishonim as to what the issue here is. Okay. One opinion is that I think the most kind of logical opinion is if you see something, it's going to be very hard for you to be impartial about it. So it's going to be very hard to judge a case when you're the one who saw what happened. Okay, the counter argument is if you're going to be a judge and listen to people and you hear testimony, well, the more so, if you see the testimony, should you be able to judge based on what you actually saw? But the flip is, well, you might not be so, you're going to be basically, you're not going to be able to be impartial because you actually saw it. Some people, by the way, say that ein eid nase dayan is only in dinei nefashot cases. If you notice, that was a dinei nefashot case when they had their machloket, and it's not necessarily true in dinei mamonot. That's also a whole debate about eid nase dayan. We'll see this again another few times. But another reason is because there's a pasuk in Dvarim 19 verse 17. It says the 2 people go who have the argument before God. Before God really means before the judges. And then you have 2 people going before judges. So they can't be the same 2 people and the same judges as well. They have to be 2 people who go before other people. And that's more like a gzerat katuv. That's the way it appears. And there's another one, which is also an interesting one that we just learned recently, you can't accept witnesses if they can't be huzam, right? You can't turn them into edim samimim. Now, what judge would accept testimony about themselves who said, right, that if I'm in the court and I'm the witness and I'm also the judge, and then two people come and say, hey, we were with you, what, I'm going to rule like we accept their testimony? So there's no real way to do hazama there, in which case, if there's no real way to do hazama, then I can't be accepted as a witness. So that's another possible reason. So there's all sorts of interesting reasons as to why ein eid na'aseh dayan. The question is, if we could use this daytime, nighttime distinction as a way of understanding it better, it's a good question. Okay, ibait ema, another possibility. Hachi ka'amrale, ha'anasvirli ka Rabbi Yosi haGelili. Okay, maybe he didn't say. Okay, now this whole problem came about because he said there's me, which we thought meant we saw what happened. And there's I saw what happened. There's me who saw what happened. And there's Rabbi Yosi haGelili who paskins in this way. And therefore, we got into this whole question, how could he possibly be an aid and a dayan? And that was our question. So either we say it's because it happened during the day. And because it happened during the day, he can immediately rule it as he saw. But that's a weird answer because it doesn't really come up so much in the sugi of aid na'aseh dayan when we get to it about this distinction. Maybe you just misunderstood what he said. When he said there's me, he didn't mean there's me who saw it. What he meant is, ha'ana desvira like Rabbi Yosi haGelili. What he meant is, there's me who holds like Rabbi Yosi haGelili, and there's Rabbi Yosi haGelili who holds Tzuri, and therefore you have to pay him Tzuri, right? And that's what he was saying. Damar Tzuri. And there's witnesses, not me, who testified against you. Zil havle Tzuri, and therefore give him Tzuri. Okay, so that's the way we can explain his words. Again, the whole reason we brought this was just because of Tzuri, which we wanted to know. From that, we just got into this whole other sugya that had nothing to do with what we were talking about eid na'aseh dayan, but a fascinating sugya. And with that, we got to learn something new, which reminds me, even though it's not really connected, but I wanted to mention that Alana Steinhain Shiur went up this week for Din and Daf. It went up yesterday about shoteh. And what Alana's going to talk about, that came up in the Mishna. If you remember, right now we're dealing with the Isha P'giatan Ra'ah. Same thing about the shoteh, the cheresh shoteh and katan. And the next 3 weeks, very fascinating series of shiurim. Alana's going to talk about the definitions, something we always struggle with, which is exactly how do you define shoteh or shotah for a woman? And she gets into all the details of really what is a shotah and what are the different levels of a shotah and what does it mean? And then she's going to move to cheresh, what a cheresh is and what a katan is. And so it'll be a whole interesting series of 3 shiurim, which connect, really to daf pechet, all of them, but we'll go over it over the next few weeks. It's a topic that comes up all over Shas, so it's a very good topic to really delve into and see in an in-depth way. Okay, next. Now that we mentioned this Rabbi Akiva opinion, the Rabbi Akiva holds ein eid na'aseh dayan, and so does Rabbi Tarfon, but now we're going to ask directly in Rabbi Akiva. There seems to be a contradiction in saying that Rabbi Akiva holds ein eid na'aseh dayan, seems like, although we're going to see it's not really, but in an argument he has with Rabbi Shimon HaTimni, he seems to say that an aid could be a dayan. So let's see. Rabbi Akiva to ein eid na'aseh dayan. So we're off on a total tangent now. From the Tzuri, we got to the story of Rabbi Yehuda Nesia. From one possible explanation of what Rabbi Yehuda Nesia said, we started this whole topic of eid na'aseh dayan. So, v'hatan, it says in a braitot, v'yika ish et ra'ehu be'even o be'egro. This is a pasuk about somebody kills someone else if they hit him with a stone or a fist. So now, why does it say stone or a fist? Shimon HaTimni omer. Well, a fist can be brought into court, right? Because when you bring the guy to judge him, his fist is on his body, so you'll see it. Now, if he hit with a fist, you can see the implement, which means the judges and the witnesses can assess in the court whether this fist is a fist that could kill or not. You might tell me, not necessarily, but okay, that's where Rabbi Akiva is going to come in. But basically, the assumption is we could tell. This guy has a fist that's, a very weak fist. He's a weakling. We're going to say, what? Killed someone with his fist? That doesn't make any sense. So therefore, from here, he learns, so basically what he's going to say is, you can only rule in a capital crime if it's like a fist, meaning that the implement is brought into court that the person killed with, like his fist is brought into court. Prat, this comes to exclude l'shiat stam mitachat yad edim. Let's say the edim can't find the implement that let's say he used a gun and we can't find the gun. So we can't convict the person. If we don't have the gun in court, implement that which he killed, Rabbi Shimon HaTimni says you can't convict the person. Amarlo Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says, what a ridiculous statement. When the Beit Din sees this fist in court, does the Beit Din see how he used his fist when he killed the person? Does the Beit Din see what he hit it? Al shoko, like where he hit it. Was it on his thigh, otzi par nafsho, or right against his heart? So, in other words, just because I have a fist, it means I could have used my fist on his foot. It doesn't prove that I killed just because they saw my fist. Could be I used a very hard fist. Could be I used my fist very softly. The fact that we see my fist in court doesn't prove anything. Ve'od. And furthermore, he's going to go on with more arguments. Let's say someone pushes someone off a roof and kills them in that way. Or top of a tower. And he dies. Does the Beit Din go to visit the site of the crime? Or do we bring the building to the court? Of course, we don't do that. Ve'od im nafla, and if it fell, chozeru boneh, do we have to rebuild that house so that we can reenact the crime? By the way, some people do this. They reenact the crime, right? The court goes and does it. But court, in those days, that is not what they did. So what typifies an egrof? Well, the egrof is really up to the witnesses to explain how the fist was used. Was it used forcefully? Was it used very weakly? Right? And maybe the guy was just so weak that the little push he got killed him, but I'm not going to be liable for death for that. So basically what they're going to say is, it's all up to the witnesses. The witnesses describe what they saw. That's how it works. What's the only case that won't work? If the witnesses didn't see, if the guy hit with a stone and the stone disappeared and the witnesses didn't even see it at the time. They just saw the guy getting hit, but they didn't really see the blow. Okay? And the Evan just kind of fell into a hole in the ground and nobody found it after that. Then you'd be exempt. Tanaim. Okay, now why did we bring this? What does it have to do with Eid Nasadan? It doesn't really, okay? But they're going to try to infer something from what Rabbi Akiva said. Katani miyat, it said here, Amarlo Rabbi Akiva, v'chibif ne beitin hikau shiudim kamma hikau. Was this done before a court that the court knows how much he hit? Which sounds like if it was done before the court and the judges themselves knew, and they were the witnesses, ha hikau bifnehem Eid Nasadan. It sounds like if it was done before the court, Rabbi Akiva is saying, well, if it was done before them, they could be the judges in that case, even though he's not really saying that. To which the Gemara says, it's not that he was actually saying the judges could be witnesses in the court and be judges and witnesses. He was just trying to counter what Rabbi Shimon Hatimi had said, but this doesn't prove anything. Okay, last part for today, which we're really only going to get started on the next sugya, Tanu Rabbanan. Sure, and we're not going to really understand it yet. Short time shemit v'yizik danimo todine nefashot. Ve'ein danimo todine mamonot. If we have a short time who attacked someone, killed them, then he went along and he hurt somebody, injured. Well, he now is supposed to get killed and he's supposed to pay damages. But remember, damages are only paid short time from the body of the animal. This is a good review. Well, he doesn't have a body anymore because he's supposed to get killed already from the first wrong thing he did. So there's no payment because there's nothing to pay with. So ein danimo todine mamonot. But mu'ad shehemi v'yizik, a shor mu'ad who damages and who kills and then damages in that order. Danimo todine mamonot v'chozrim v'danimo todine nefashot. We do ABBA. First he killed, then he injured someone. We're going to first judge him on the injury, then we're going to judge him on the death. Kadmu v'danu dine nefashot, ein chozrim v'danimo todine mamonot. If first they judged him by death, then they're not going to be able to charge him on the Dina Mamonot case. To which the Gemara is going to say, well, why not? Because theoretically, it doesn't connect with his body. Short muad pays mina aliyah, we say, right? Whatever they damage doesn't have to do with how much they're worth. So the Gemara is going to ask, we don't really understand why that's the case. So we're going to deal with this tomorrow and figure out what the issue is here. Okay, and then we'll see why we got to this. So review for today, we started with, okay, the takana Usha, that part we already explained, so I'm not going to go back there and review. We already did a review on that. Now we're going to we got to the bowshed case, we talked about different amounts people would have to pay. We had that interesting case about the Kisai Rosh and how we said, basically, if I do something to myself, it's different than if someone else does it to me. And therefore, you would have to pay both. Then we had this question, Manet Tzuri or Manet Medina, to which we said it's the Manet Tzuri, it's the higher currency. We learned that from this case of Rabbi Yehuda Nesia. Then we had to understand what he was saying when he said, this is me, this is Rabbi Yosi haGelili. Did he mean, I saw it and I'm judging it, which would create a whole big problem to Eid Nasadayan, which we know you can't do. And then we said, no, maybe he was saying something else, or maybe really Eid could be Nasadayan if it all happened during the day. Or maybe he just said, well, there's me who holds like Rabbi Yosi haGelili, and that's why I'm going to charge you this amount. And then we had a whole question once we brought up Rabbi Akiva, who says, Ein Eid Nasadayan, does he really say that? In this argument with Rabbi Shimon Timni, it sounded like he was saying something different, but we say, no, that's not really what he meant. You really didn't understand. He was just responding. You can't infer what you thought to infer from what he said. And then we got to this last case of a shur, two different shurim, a tam and a muad, who both killed and damaged. What would be, how it would be able to judge them on both cases or not, and depending possibly on the order. And that's what we're going to get into tomorrow. Wishing everyone a good day. Hoping for good news. We will see you all tomorrow. Salat tovot.